y'all? Nick Horton, the Iron Samurai, Tamara Reynolds, T-Bone, the beautiful manatee, coming at you live again from our car on the way to Durham for a mock meat, which is not the same as meat that is like made of tofu or anything like that. It's a completely different kind of mock meat. It's one for weightlifters. And we are going to do here another episode of Ask the Unicorns. You ask us questions, we provide you with answers. We also provide you with a whole bunch of random ass crap in the middle of those answers that sometimes is funny and sometimes it's just totally random. That's what you get for Asking the Unicorns. So today, what we've got is a question from Theodore Lim. He says, what do you think of coaches that program very little hang, block, or power lifts and only program the full lifts? We have multiple answers to this. The first one I'm going to give is that I'm not going to actually talk about coaches because I don't, I'm not in the business of talking about what I think about the coaches. I will talk about programming, however, because I'm all about programming. What do I think about programs that are like that tend to be just largely focused on the full lifts, etc., versus those that have a pretty heavy reliance on what we might call, assistance versions of the Olympic lifts. When you say assistance lifts, we have to be a little careful because that could include all kinds of things like pulls and squats and barbell rows, So we don't mean that. We mean like bits and pieces of the Olympic lift done in isolation. So a hang version would be like that. A block is basically a hang. You have something to start it off of so that you don't have to pull it off the ground
Power
first.
version is not.
Power version, though, is very different. It's not part of the normal lift. It's really just what happens when you explode maximally with a lighter than maximal weight. That's really all the power is. You caught it above. I usually count anything as a power that's not a full. And that might seem really obvious, except I'm comfortable. If you're not catching it rock bottom, that's pretty much a power. And I can say that because it's almost impossible to catch a power clean or any any snatch that's below parallel but not in the bottom. Stopping yourself somewhere way down there is basically impossible because the musculature can't take that. You just get crushed. You go straight down to the bottom. So either you're at top of the thigh parallel to the ground, which is usually there and above is what most people think of as a power version, or you just get shoved into the bottom. So that is a little different than say a hang or a power, because the hang or the blocks. The hang or the blocks, those versions are really about taking out a piece of the pull, which is from the floor to maybe the knee or the floor to halfway up the thigh. That part's no longer part of the lift. You're just doing it from there up. The power version isn't about the pull, it's about the catch.
And it's actually, you can power in a meet. You can't do an assistance lift in a meet.
Yeah, so that's a huge thing. The power versions of the lifts are legal lifts in a contest, which means you could still think of them as just being full Olympic lifts in that regard. They're not full because you didn't catch them at the bottom, but they are competitive lifts. The power snatch and the power clean and jerk, you can totally do that forever, your entire career, and be a competitive Olympic lifter. You cannot pull off the blocks in a meet. You cannot pull from the hang in a meet.
Although I really wish I could jerk off the blocks in a meet.
Yeah.
I am trying to redo the sport so that I never have to clean again.
Yeah, I want the sport to be snatch and jerks off blocks.
Jerk off the blocks.
I would love that. That'd be a perfect sport for me.
That would be so much better.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Cleans are horrible. I hate cleans. So to answer your question, honestly, a lot of it comes down to your demographic. Honestly, the full versions give you everything. They're the thing that's kind of hard for people is being able to combine these different elements of the snatch or the clean. It's not so much that they have a problem area that needs to be drilled all by itself in isolation. It's more that they have a hard time putting together a couple components that they can do pretty well in isolation. So maybe they can do that, what you call a first pull, everything from the floor to the hip, pretty well if they don't have to go any farther than that. And it looks good. Maybe they're pretty good from the hip up if they don't have to pull it up to the hip first. But what they really suck at is going from the floor, hitting the hip, and then going up. Don't get me wrong, I think there's a lot of value at certain stages in a lifter's development in going through a little bit of work on a block, or I've certainly used them before. Hang lifts, not as much. Hangs are okay, but it's kind of weird because you have to stand up with it. You got it in your hands, and you got to like bend down a little bit. It's just complicated. If you have blocks, I actually do prefer that. The problem with the blocks, the big problem with blocks, is that you can drill horribly bad technique and not know it. Same thing's true with the hang.
You can do things that you can't actually. You can get yourself into a position that you can't really get yourself into if you were coming off the floor.
Yeah.
You can get yourself into all sorts of crazy positions with the bar, especially on the blocks, and set yourself up however you want to. And it can't actually happen in real life when you're coming off the floor.
The best way that we usually notice that this is a problem is when we see a lifter who could do more off the blocks for their snatch or their clean than they can off the floor. This is a really bad sign. This means that they are pulling off the blocks in such a way that is not the same as the way that they would get that bar into that position from the floor. I don't see that as particularly valuable. Now, don't get me wrong, I do like things as a strength movement, like rack pulls or something. If you're just one of those crazy people, I don't ever really program that, but I do see value there in overloading your body. This is not something that applies to a snatch or clean and jerk, not in my opinion. I don't see the value in that whatsoever. I do see value in doing block work for a more advanced lifter in a way that's kind of similar to, like a box squat, where like you're starting the lift off. Like when you do box squats and like sort of that powerlifting West Side style, where you sit down in the box and you relax for a second, and then you have to get off the box and stand up. That's pretty hard to do, and it does kind of teach your body some lessons that apply to a full squat. I don't tend to do box squats. I think they're really more applicable to people who are suited up lifters, not to people like us. But that is kind of the essence and the idea of a box squat. And I think there's something similar to that going on with block work. With the blocks, you're getting yourself set up in this position that looks exactly like where you'd be if you were going to start off the floor and get to that position, except you're starting right there without any momentum or like maximum tension going on or anything like that. You have to start from a dead stop right there. I think there's value there. Absolutely. I think that can help make you a more explosive lifter from, say, the knee up. I do like, every once in a while, having lifters who are more advanced do block work in a way that looks identical to how they would snatch or clean and jerk. We're just starting the bar somewhere around the knee or a little above the knee. I see some value in that. But I am emphasizing the idea of a more advanced lifter for a reason. Because the more advanced lifters are going to mimic that pull identically. And they know the difference. They're capable of seeing that difference. And they do so very well. A less advanced lifter, certainly a beginner, is going to do that horribly bad. Now, don't get me wrong. If you're in one of those clubs where you've got a coach watching you like a fucking hawk every 5 seconds, then that's totally different. I know coaches out there who are programming this stuff because they know they're going to be there watching you every single second. So that's totally different. Totally, completely different. Because you have a coach right there hounding your ass. So that's perfectly fine. I have no problem with that. If you're in that luxurious position, you do whatever your coach tells you to do. The difference is that we spend a lot of time trying to help people out over the internet. Getting people to do this on their own in a garage or by themselves at a CrossFit club, or even a lot of our own like competitive team members don't see us but once a week, maybe twice a week, because they live an hour or two away. They have to travel in. And so they have to do most of the training all by themselves, all on their own. And because of that, we have to be very cognizant of the fact that most of their training is done without a watchful eye. And that means the programming itself has to incorporate that as a reality. So I do not like block work for beginners. I hate it for beginners. I really do. Because they're going to start doing stuff that looks totally different than a snatch or a clean. It's not helpful at all. You're drilling all the wrong motor patterns. And then you're fucked when you try to go off the floor because there's none of it's translated. Now you're snatching 10, 15 kilos off the blocks above what you can do off the floor. That's ridiculous. You shouldn't be able to do that. That momentum off the floor is not going to help a lot, but it's going to help a little bit, and you should be able to do at least identical or more off the floor if your technique's the same off of both. So that's my basic opinion about it, is that, it's too problematic most of the time for most lifters, so I don't prefer it. I prefer the full lifts or the power lifts. We alternate those a lot. as your primary movements, because those are both the competitive lifts. So you're allowed to use either one of those in a competition. So whatever you're doing to practice that is something you can translate into a competition immediately. And it's less problematic for us when we're dealing with lifters who are not going to be in, our gym all the time, being watched by us all the time. And that is just a reality of how it works. So we have to deal with that. And then the other issue is time-wise. If you only have so much time.
Yeah, if you're even the average person who's lifting maybe 3 days a week, which is a lot of our lifters, a world champion can spend 6 or 7 days a week, all day long, training in multiple sessions, doing whatever the hell they want to do. So they're going to go from the floor a ton of times. They might also go from blocks. They might do work from the hang. They can do whatever they want because they have the time to do that. If you're training 3 times a week and you need to snatch, clean and jerk, and squat, well, the average person just doesn't have unlimited time to add all this other crazy stuff in.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest change in my own training was going from thinking that I had to do all this positional work to starting to work with a coach who was like, what makes you better at snatching from the floor? Snatching from the fucking floor all the time. And once I started doing that all the time, all of a sudden my snatch got better. So I think there's this hang up by beginners a lot of times that they need to really work on positional stuff for a much longer period of time than they actually do. Because if you can't put it all together into a full lift from the floor, then what's the point?
Yeah.
That's what you do in a contest, and that's the whole point. It's a sport. You need to play the sport. So we don't go and do positional work on the platform in the meet. Get good at those positions as quickly as possible and then start lifting from the floor.
Right.
So that's kind of our philosophy with people who walk in the door. Our goal is to get them lifting from the floor as soon as possible.
Yeah.
It's not to spend that's not to say that they go heavy right away or that, we expect them to look like world champions, but you have to be realistic in your expectations based on the amount of time that the person can put in.
Yeah.
And for most people, that's not even nearly as much time as what we personally have to train. So then when something has to go, then I'm going to kick out block work before I'm going to kick out other things.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a completely different kind of world. I mean, when you are basically a professional athlete, you can do everything. And they basically do. Putting the cart before the horse or whatever else, like that sort of idea, we don't know. I mean, what's making what happen? Who the fuck knows? They're just doing everything all the time. So, isn't that nice for them? That's great. We don't have that luxury with most of our lifters. We have to just pick and choose, and the things that seem to work the best when you have limited time with people is get them to do the full lifts as often as humanly possible. You do the full lifts as often as you possibly can, you're going to get a lot better. If you break it up too much, they don't get that feel of playing the game. And our goal here for most lifters is what's going to get you into a competition as fast as humanly possible and get you moving forward as a competitive weightlifter as quickly as you can. That is extremely important to us. We're about creating new lifters, helping you be a new lifter and actually do the sport for real. We're not into idealism or any of that kind of BS. You're not going to be training 20 hours a day. So, too bad. That's about it. So on that motivational note, I think that's the question. I think that's the question. We like full lifts for the most part. I'm not against the other stuff. Just remember that it's secondary. That's all. All right. T-Bone the Iron Samurai out.